Welcome to this explainer. So I want you to travel back with me to June 25th, 2006. The setting? Nuremberg, Germany. It's the FIFA World Cup round of 16, and two incredibly talented powerhouse teams, Portugal and the Netherlands, are gearing up to fight for a spot in the quarterfinals. The stadium is absolutely buzzing. I mean, it is electric. Supporters from both nations are packing the stands, waving flags, singing their hearts out, and fully expecting a total masterpiece of a football match. But, as we're going to see, by the end of the night, this highly anticipated knockout game would devolve into completely unforgettable chaos. It cemented its place in history, not for champions and definitely not for legendary goals, but as one of the absolutely dirtiest, most chaotic games ever played.
Okay, let's just jump straight into the climax of the night, because one observer famously noted that the referee's notebook was filling faster than the scoreboard. And wow, that single sentence perfectly captures the sheer absurdity of what this match turned into. As the game dragged toward its conclusion, history was definitely being written, but absolutely not for goals. Discipline had just completely vanished from the pitch. Card after card kept coming out, and the numbers got genuinely astonishing. The match essentially morphed into this bizarre spectacle where the official on the field was way busier than the actual players trying to score.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast. Both of these nations were loaded with gifted players, right? They both harbored serious dreams of lifting that World Cup trophy, so the packed stadium was fully anticipating tactical brilliance, individual genius, and a really fierce sporting contest. But the reality? Well, it became a dark, aggressive collision course. Every single challenge seemed harder than the last, tempers were constantly flaring, and instead of a beautiful football match, the entire world witnessed hyper-aggressive fouls, endless retaliation, and just complete, utter chaos.
Rewinding back to the very beginning for a second, we really have to understand the environment that bred all this madness. Imagine standing in that tunnel just moments before kickoff. World Cup knockout matches carry this very special, incredibly heavy pressure. At this stage of the tournament, one defeat abruptly ends the dream. One mistake can literally define a player's entire career. So as the players lined up before the starting whistle, emotions were already running incredibly high. The stakes were astronomical. Television audiences around the globe were tuned in. And hey, everything appeared normal for the moment. But that unbearable pre-game tension, it was a ticking time bomb.
And listen, this wasn't some slow, gradual descent into madness. Oh no, it was immediate. Just think about how this escalated. Within just the first few minutes of the match, hard tackles start flying in. Players are challenging each other with terrifying aggression, and arguments are kicking off almost instantly. So the Russian referee Valentin Ivanov reaches into his pocket incredibly early to issue a yellow card, and then boom, quickly follows it up with another. Now these early warnings were supposed to establish his authority, right? But instead of calming the players down, they changed absolutely nothing. The temperature of the match just kept rising, minute by agonizing minute.
What we see here is a vicious cycle that quickly hijacked the game. It was a literal vendetta on the pitch. It would always start with an aggressive challenge, which instantly sparked intense anger and super loud arguments. But the thing is, it didn't end with the referee's whistle. Players remembered those earlier fouls. Old grievances resurfaced, and suddenly these challenges became deeply personal. Every foul produced a retaliatory strike, giving the match its own dark, unstoppable momentum. The football itself? Totally secondary. Nobody wanted to back down, and raw emotion took total control of the wheel. Yet, incredibly, amidst this darkening atmosphere of non-stop protests and brutal collisions, we actually got a fleeting moment of what people came to see. A really dangerous opportunity suddenly emerged as Portugal pushed forward on the attack. And in a moment of pure brilliance, Portugal's Manic strikes the ball beautifully, sending it right into the net. Goal. Portugal had somehow managed to take the lead right in the middle of absolute mayhem.
And as you can probably imagine, the Portuguese supporters just exploded with celebration. Their bench erupted in pure joy. But ironically, this solitary goal didn't settle the game down at all. In fact, the Dutch players responded with immense frustration. The tension on the pitch ramped up yet again. The match was becoming increasingly hostile, because now the stakes were raised even higher for the trailing team.
So here's where things get really wild. The normal rules of sportsmanship, they began to vanish entirely. And this was perfectly highlighted by one of the absolute most bizarre and controversial moments of the night, involving an injured Dutch player lying on the ground. Now you know the drill. Unwritten rules in football are almost always respected, even in the fiercest rivalries. But in Nuremberg, every single standard of etiquette was just thrown right out the window. It really leaves you wondering exactly how deep the bad blood had gotten.
Okay, let's unpack exactly what happened during this explosive incident. Traditionally, when play is stopped for an injury, the opposing team politely returns possession of the ball once play resumes. But here, the Dutch defender John Heitinga failed to return the ball. It remained in active play. What followed was just extreme confusion. Players furiously confronted one another, a whole group of them completely surrounded the referee to protest, and others started directly exchanging heated words and physical shoves. The atmosphere inside that stadium shifted instantly from tense to utterly explosive.
You could feel the energy in the stadium completely morph. The crowd was no longer focused solely on the beautiful game. Nope. Instead, they were gasping at every single tackle and generating this deafening noise with every new confrontation. The fans in the stands were basically just waiting on the edge of their seats to see what would happen next, waiting for the inevitable moment a challenge truly crossed the line. The tension at this point was practically unbearable.
And, well, there it was. Eventually, the inevitable happened. A challenge crossed the line. The referee, Valentin Ivanov, who had spent the entire night being constantly surrounded by screaming, protesting players, had finally seen enough. He reached into his pocket, but this time, guys, it wasn't a warning. Red card. Portugal's Costinha was shown the first red card of the night, officially dismissed from the pitch.
Instantly, a massive, roaring wave of boos echoed through the stands. You could literally feel it as the numerical balance of these two highly competitive teams suddenly, violently shifted. The pressure down there on the grass was practically suffocating.
But mingled right in with those boos were deafening cheers from the opposing side. Now, you would think that sending a player off would finally establish some control, right? That it would serve as the ultimate warning to everyone else. But actually, scratch that. It wasn't the case here at all. Instead of calming the match, the dismissal poured absolute gasoline on the fire. It fueled an avalanche of even more chaos. Total, unfiltered confusion reigned. Nobody knew where the next argument was going to come from. Players barely had time to catch their breath before another vicious incident would kick off. Portugal's Deco and the Netherlands' Khalid Boulahrouz and Giovan Bronkhorst would all eventually follow Costinha right down the tunnel to the locker room. The referee just kept reaching for his pocket, and the match was completely slipping away from everyone involved. It had fully transformed from a sporting contest into a literal war of attrition.
So, we have to ask ourselves, why did this happen? Well, there's no single explanation. It's more like a perfect storm. Some folks blame the referee's heavy hand, while others pointed the finger straight at the player's lack of restraint. But honestly, it was the combination of enormous knockout stage pressure where every single mistake feels a million times larger, intense national rivalry, escalating frustration, and uncontrollable raw emotion. In an environment like that, every foul felt monumental, and control simply vanished completely.
Eventually, the final whistle did blow. Portugal had survived. They won the match, and their World Cup dream was somehow still alive. Yet, when the dust settled, almost nobody in the football world was talking about the actual result, or the fact that Portugal was advancing to the quarterfinals. No way. The legacy of this match was already cemented in something far, far darker.
Instead, commentators, diehard supporters, and historians were just left totally reeling from the statistics. 16. Let that sink in for a second. That is the number of yellow cards issued during this single match. It's an astonishing, totally record-breaking figure that commentators literally struggled to even keep track of as the whole thing unfolded live.
And if that wasn't enough, it was followed immediately by an unprecedented 4 red cards. 4 dismissals in a single World Cup match. These figures are absolutely staggering to look back on, and they remain completely unbelievable to football historians even today. It firmly etched the Battle of Nuremberg into the history books as the dirtiest match in the entire tournament's history.
So looking back at this infamous night, where rivalry entirely overpowered reason and football devolved into pure chaos, we are left with a really dark, fascinating psychological question about professional athletes. Think about it. When the stakes are at their absolute highest, when one single mistake can end a lifelong dream, does pressure inevitably destroy discipline? It's a question that keeps football historians returning to Nuremberg time and time again, and one that leaves us all wondering just how incredibly thin the line really is between a beautiful game and an all-out battle.